You know that specific silence before a room erupts in laughter at an insult? I lived in that silence, smiling exactly like the loser they wanted to see. But while my father toasted my siblings, my phone vibrated against my hip. The deal closed at 9/7 at night. They do not know it yet. But the failure of the family just bought the debt that decides if they have a roof over their heads tomorrow. My name is Peyton Smith, and I stood near the expansive mahogany bar of the Cedar Hollow Lodge, watching the ice melt in my untouched glass of tonic water. The room was suffocatingly warm, filled with the scent of expensive roast beef, heavy cologne, and the distinct metallic tang of desperation masked as opulence. This was the Kincaid family reunion, an event that had less to do with familial bonds and everything to do with maintaining the fragile illusion that the Kincaid empire was still the titan of industry it had been 20 years ago. The lodge, located just on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio, was my father's pride and joy. It was a sprawling structure of timber and stone, designed to look rustic but costing more to maintain annually than most people earned in a lifetime. Tonight, it was packed with distant cousins, business associates, and local politicians, all eager to kiss the ring of Warren Kincaid. A string quartet played something classical and innocuous in the corner, fighting a losing battle against the roar of laughter and the clinking of crystal flutes. I smoothed the fabric of my black suit jacket. It was tailored, sharp, and unassuming. I did not dress to impress them. I dressed to disappear. In this room, I was a ghost, a glitch in the perfect programming of the Kincaid dynasty. My last name was Smith now, a deliberate choice I made years ago to distance myself from the brand. But tonight, summoned by a mandatory invitation, I was dragged back into the orbit. My brother, Logan, was holding court near the fireplace. At 36, he was the heir apparent, the CFO of Kincaid Event and Lodging. He wore a watch that cost more than my first car, and he was laughing too loudly at a joke that was not funny. Beside him stood my sister, Paige. She was the vice president of communications, a title that essentially meant she was paid to make sure nobody looked too closely at the cracks in the foundation. She looked radiant in emerald green, her hand resting possessively on Logan's arm, projecting the image of the united, unstoppable siblings. And then there was me. The music swelled and then cut out abruptly. The murmur of the crowd died down as a spoon chimed against a glass. Warren Kincaid stepped up to the small podium set up in front of the stone hearth. My father looked every inch the patriarch. His silver hair was coiffed to perfection, his tuxedo midnight blue. He commanded the room not with affection, but with the sheer gravity of his ego. He scanned the crowd, his eyes twinkling with the dopamine hit of having 200 people waiting on his every word. "Thank you all for coming," Warren boomed, his voice rich and baritone, the voice that had closed 1,000 deals. "Family, it is the bedrock of everything we build. It is the legacy we leave behind." He raised his glass of scotch. "I look around this room, and I am filled with gratitude. I see my son, Logan, who has steered our finances with the precision of a surgeon." Logan tipped his glass, looking smug. The crowd murmured their approval. "I see my daughter, Paige," Warren continued, "whose grace and intelligence keep our name shining bright in the community." Paige offered a practiced, humble smile, dipping her head just enough to catch the light on her diamond earrings. Warren paused. The silence stretched a second too long. His eyes found me in the back of the room. The warmth evaporated from his face, replaced by a cold, performative disappointment that he had perfected over 3 decades. "And," Warren said, his voice dropping to a theatrical sigh, "I am proud of all my children except for the loser standing by the bar." The silence that followed was absolute. It lasted for a heartbeat, 2 heartbeats, and then, as if on cue, the room erupted. It was a nervous, braying laughter. The guests, terrified of being on the wrong side of Warren Kincaid, followed his lead. They laughed because he wanted them to laugh. They laughed to signal their loyalty to the tribe. I felt the eyes of 200 people slide over me. I saw Logan sneer, a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. I saw Paige tilt her head, offering a look of exaggerated pity that was far crueler than hatred. I did not flinch. I did not look down. I did not let my lip tremble. Instead, I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was a small, tight curvature of the lips, devoid of humor. I held Warren's gaze across the room. I saw a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He expected tears. He expected me to run out the side door, humiliated, just as I had done when I was 16 and 20 and 25. He wanted the satisfaction of crushing me publicly to elevate the status of his golden children. My refusal to break seemed to irritate him. He set his glass down on the podium with a sharp thud that echoed through the microphone. "Come here, Peyton," he commanded. It was not an invitation. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, creating a wide aisle between the bar and the fireplace. I walked it. My heels clicked rhythmically on the hardwood floor. I kept my chin high. My hands relaxed at my sides. I could hear the whispers as I passed. "That's the one who works in data entry or something. Poor Warren. Why did she even come?" When I reached the front, Warren did not embrace me. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a thick, unfolded envelope. He held it out to me as if it were a piece of trash he was tired of carrying. "I am done pretending, Peyton," Warren announced, his voice projecting to the back of the room. "You have been a leech on this family's reputation long enough. You contribute nothing. You achieve nothing. You are 34 years old, and you are a dead weight." He thrust the envelope into my hands. "This is a formal disinheritance and liability waiver. It states that you have no claim to the Kincaid estate, no claim to our future earnings, and that you are solely responsible for your own pathetic existence. It also absolves the family of any debts or troubles you might drag to our doorstep." I looked down at the document. The bold letters at the top read, "Disinheritance and Liability Waiver." It was standard legal boilerplate, but the cruelty was in the presentation. He had brought this to a party. He had planned this. "Sign it," Warren said, pulling a gold fountain pen from his pocket and uncapping it. "Sign it now. Let's get it over with so we can enjoy the rest of the night without your shadow hanging over us." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Paige hold up her phone. She was recording. Of course she was. This would be circulating in the family group chats within the hour. A warning to anyone else who dared to defy the narrative. I took the pen. The metal was warm from his hand. I looked at the paper. This was his masterstroke. He thought he was cutting off a gangrenous limb. He thought he was protecting his assets from his failure of a daughter. He had no idea that he was handing me the very knife I needed to cut his throat. I could feel the vibration of my phone in the pocket of my blazer. It was a single, sustained buzz. I shifted the papers to my left hand and reached into my pocket with my right. "Put the phone away," Logan snapped from the sidelines. "Have some respect." I ignored him. I pulled the phone out and glanced at the screen. It was a text message from a number I did not have saved, but I knew exactly who it was. Debt purchased. Transaction confirmed. 9/7 at night. The time on the screen was exactly 9/7 at night. The deal was done. The wire transfer had cleared. A rush of cold adrenaline flooded my system. It was not fear. It was the feeling of a sniper who had just aligned the perfect shot after waiting in the snow for 3 days. Meridian Vale Partners now owned the primary distressed debt of Kincaid Event and Lodging, and nobody in this room knew that I was the senior analyst who had flagged the portfolio, or that I was the one who had recommended the purchase. I slid the phone back into my pocket. I looked at the document again. By signing this, I was legally severing my ties to the family fortune, but I was also severing my ties to their liability. Warren was so obsessed with cutting me out of the will that he was accidentally handing me immunity from the wreckage he was about to cause. I looked up at Warren. He was grinning, a shark sensing blood in the water. "What is the matter?" he taunted. "Hands shaking too much to write?" I took a step closer to him. The microphone picked up the sound of my breath. "You want me to sign this?" I asked, my voice calm, steady, and loud enough to be heard by the waiter standing by the kitchen doors. "Right here, in front of everyone. I want witnesses," Warren declared. spreading his arms wide. "I want everyone to see that I'm finally cleaning house." The room chuckled again. A few people clapped. It was grotesque. I uncapped the pen. I placed the envelope on the small table beside the podium. I smoothed the paper down. "Okay," I said. I signed my name. Peyton Smith, not Kincaid, Smith. The strokes were broad and firm. There was no hesitation. I capped the pen and set it down on top of the executed document. Warren snatched the paper up immediately, waving it in the air like a trophy. "Finally, ladies and gentlemen, the leech is gone. We are free." Logan clapped his hands over his head. Paige let out a dramatic sigh of relief. Still filming. I did not move. I stood there, watching my father celebrate his victory. He looked so powerful. He looked so untouchable. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet had already liquefied. I waited until the applause died down. I waited until Warren turned back to me, his eyes narrowing, expecting me to slink away in shame. "Why are you still here?" Warren hissed, off mic this time, but close enough for the front row to hear. "Go home, loser." I smiled again. This time, I let it reach my eyes. It was the smile of someone who knew the end of the movie. "I will go," I said, my voice cutting through the lingering noise of the party. "I just wanted to make sure you were happy, Dad." "I am ecstatic," he spat. "Good," I said, "because you are going to need that happiness." I turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back over my shoulder. The entire room was watching me, confused by my lack of devastation. "Oh, and Dad?" I said. He glared at me, his jaw tight. "I will see you tomorrow," I said pleasantly. 10 in the morning, Warren laughed, a harsh barking sound. "I am not meeting with you tomorrow. I just fired you from this family." "You are not meeting with your daughter," I clarified, my voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice I used in boardrooms, the voice that made CEOs sweat. "You are meeting with the new owner of your debt." The smile fell from Warren's face. It did not fade. It vanished. "What did you say?" he whispered. I repeated, enunciating every syllable. "Meet the person saving this family tomorrow, 10 in the morning. Do not be late." I did not wait for his response. I turned and walked toward the double doors. The silence in the room was different now. It was not the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of confusion, of fear, of a predator suddenly realizing it might be prey. As I pushed the heavy oak doors open and stepped into the cool Ohio night, I heard Warren's voice falter behind me, trying to regain control of the room, trying to make a joke of what I had just said, but the laughter was thin. I walked to my rental car, the gravel crunching under my heels. I sat in the driver's seat and exhaled, a long, shaky breath that I had been holding for 16 years. I looked at the lodge one last time. It was glowing with golden light, a beacon of wealth and exclusion. Tomorrow, I would turn those lights off. I started the engine and drove away, leaving the loser behind in the ballroom. The silence inside my rental car was heavy, but it was a familiar weight. I had been carrying it for 16 years. As the lights of the Cedar Hollow Lodge faded in the rearview mirror, swallowed by the dense Ohio tree line, my pulse finally began to slow. I drove with the radio off. I needed the quiet to organize the data points in my head, just as I had organized the spreadsheets that now governed the fate of the Kincaid family, to understand why I stood there tonight and let my father spit on my dignity. You have to understand the architecture of my exile. It was not a sudden explosion. There was no single dramatic fight where vases were thrown or police were called. My departure from the Kincaid family was a slow, agonizing erosion, like a cliff face falling into the sea one pebble at a time. 16 years ago, I packed my life into a rusted Honda Civic while my family ate dinner downstairs. I could hear the clatter of silverware and the boom of Warren's laughter. He was recounting a golf game, or perhaps a deal he had closed. It did not matter. What mattered was that there was no place setting for me. There never really had been. In the Kincaid ecosystem, value was determined by visibility. Logan was the heir, the golden calf. He had the jawline, the charm, and the moral flexibility required to run a business built on leverage and handshake deals. Warren loved him because Warren saw a younger, hungrier version of himself in Logan. Paige was the princess. She was groomed for galas and press releases. Her job was to be beautiful and to marry well, or at least to date men who could be useful to the firm. And then there was Peyton. I was the glitch. I did not care about the country club. I did not care about the gala circuit. I liked order. I liked numbers. I liked the brutal honesty of mathematics. While Logan was crashing sports cars that Daddy paid to fix, and Paige was failing algebra 3 times, I was in the library, teaching myself forensic accounting. I thought, in my naive teenage heart, that if I could just show Warren that I was smart, that I could be useful, he would look at me the way he looked at them. I was wrong. The day I left was the day I realized that Warren Kincaid did not want a smart daughter. He wanted an audience. He wanted dependence. My competence was an insult to him because it did not require his patronage. When I showed him a flaw in his tax filings that could save the company $50,000, he did not thank me. He threw the papers in the trash and told me to stop snooping in adult business. He called me a buzzkill. He called me a loser. So I became one. I left that night and never asked for a dime. I worked 2 jobs to put myself through college. I waited tables at a diner where the grease smell settled into my pores, and I filed paperwork at a law firm until my fingers cramped. I took out student loans and paid them off with aggressive, calculated precision. I lived in a studio apartment the size of a walk-in closet. I wore thrift store clothes. I drove a car that rattled when it went over 40 miles an hour. I crafted a life of deliberate obscurity. I blocked them on social media. I changed my number. I legally changed my name to Smith, the most invisible name in the American directory. I wanted to be a ghost, but while I was invisible to them, I was building something real. I found my home in the unglamorous, sterile world of risk analysis and distressed debt. It is not the kind of finance that makes it into movies. There are no shouting matches on the trading floor. It is quiet work. It is the work of autopsies. At Meridian Vale Partners, we are the vultures that circle when a company starts to limp. We look at the balance sheets that CEOs try to hide. We find the rot in the foundation before the house collapses. I was good at it. I was terrifyingly good at it. I had spent my entire childhood analyzing the moods and lies of a narcissist. Analyzing failing companies was effortless by comparison. I rose through the ranks not by being loud, but by being right. When I said a company would fold in 6 months, it folded in 6 months. When I said a CEO was skimming off the top, we usually found the offshore accounts within the week. I became a partner at Meridian Vale 3 years ago. My net worth is currently sitting in the mid-7 figures. I own my apartment in Chicago outright. I have a portfolio that would make Warren weep with envy. But the Kincaids knew none of this. To them, I was just Peyton the failure, the one who ran away because she could not hack the pressure of greatness. I let them believe it. It was safer that way. If they thought I was weak, they would never see the knife coming. I had no intention of ever returning to Cedar Hollow. The invitation to the reunion had gone straight into my shredder. But then, 3 days ago, my phone buzzed with a message from the only person in that family who had ever shown me a shred of kindness, Aunt Vivian. She was my mother's sister, a woman who had been sidelined by the Kincaids just as I had, though she lacked the courage to leave. Her message was short and frantic. "Your father is doing something crazy. He is desperate for cash. I heard him on the phone with the bank. He mentioned your name, Peyton. Please be careful. My name." That was the trigger. If Warren was just driving the company into the ground, I would have watched from a distance and roasted marshmallows over the fire. But if he was using my name, that was a violation of the demilitarized zone I had established. I ran a credit check on myself that night. It was a routine I did every quarter, but I expedited it. Everything looked clean. My credit score was perfect. My accounts were secure. But my instincts, sharpened by a decade of hunting corporate fraud, told me Vivian was not lying. I dug deeper. I accessed the databases that Meridian Vale used for background checks on hostile takeovers. I looked for variations, for linkages, for shadow accounts, and there it was. It was buried deep in the subledger of a shell company registered in Delaware, a company that listed Kincaid Event and Lodging as its parent entity. It was a line of credit, a massive one. I bought a plane ticket to Ohio the next morning. When I walked into the lodge tonight, I was not there to eat roast beef. I was there on a reconnaissance mission. I needed to confirm the data with my own eyes. I needed to see the desperation up close. I played the role perfectly. I wore a simple suit. Nothing flashy. I stood in the back. I let them sneer. I let Logan make his jokes about my cheap shoes. I let Paige look at me with that sickening pity. But while they were looking at me, I was looking at the room. I saw the signs of decay that no one else noticed. The floral arrangements were sparse, filled out with cheap greenery instead of the expensive orchids Warren usually demanded. The open bar was serving mid-shelf liquor decanted into crystal bottles to hide the labels. The staff was thin. I counted only 4 servers for 200 guests, which meant Warren was cutting labor costs to the bone. I moved through the crowd, a shark in a sea of guppies, listening. I stood near a group of local investors by the buffet. "Warren says the expansion is on hold," one man whispered, poking at a piece of dry chicken. "On hold?" another replied. "I heard the bank is calling in the note. 30 days. If he does not find a liquidity injection, the whole thing goes belly up." 30 days, the first man muttered. "That explains why he's pushing this reunion so hard. He is looking for a white knight." I drifted away, my face impassive. 30 days. They were on the brink of insolvency. Then I saw Logan and Paige arguing in the hallway near the restrooms. They thought they were alone. I stopped around the corner, feigning interest in a painting of a hunting dog. "We cannot keep moving money around like this. Logan," Paige hissed. "If the auditors come back—" "Shut up," Logan snapped, his voice tight with panic. "Just keep smiling. Dad says he has a plan. He says he has a failsafe." "The failsafe is a person, Logan," Paige whispered, "and she is standing in the ballroom." My blood ran cold. I walked back into the party, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knew then, I knew why I was invited. I was not a guest. I was a sacrifice. When Warren called me up to the podium, when he made his speech about the loser, when he handed me that disinheritance and liability waiver, everything clicked into place. He was not just cutting me out. He was trying to insulate the family assets from something. By forcing me to sign a document stating I had no claim to the estate and no connection to their liabilities, he was creating a legal firewall. Why would he need a firewall against a daughter he claimed had nothing unless that daughter was unknowingly holding the bag? I stood there on that stage, looking at the document. I saw the legal jargon, but I saw the trap beneath it, and in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. I did not sign that paper to please him. I signed it because I needed to sever my legitimate legal connection to the family immediately. I needed to be a stranger, because a stranger can buy debt that a family member cannot. A stranger can foreclose. A stranger can destroy. The text message from my team at Meridian Vale came at 9:07 at night. It was the confirmation I had been waiting for since I landed in Ohio. Debt purchased. We had acquired the distressed loan portfolio of Kincaid Event and Lodging from their regional bank. The bank had been all too happy to unload the toxic asset for 60 cents on the dollar. They knew Warren was drowning. They just wanted out. So now, I owned the paper. I owned the mortgage on the lodge. I owned the liens on the equipment. I owned the debt that Warren had personally guaranteed. But there was one final piece of the puzzle that I had pieced together right before I left the lodge. A realization that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel of my rental car now. I thought back to the document I had seen in the database, the line of credit. It was for $2 million. It was taken out 4 years ago. It had been serviced with minimum payments until 3 months ago, when it went into default. The name on the primary borrower line was not Warren Kincaid. It was not Logan Kincaid. It was Peyton Smith. It was not a coincidence. It was identity theft. Warren had used my social security number, which, of course, he had access to from old tax returns to open a line of credit in my name. He had likely forged my signature, using the distance I had placed between us as a cover. He assumed that because I was a loser, living in obscurity, I would never check my credit, or that I would be too poor to fight it if I did. He probably thought he could pay it back before I ever noticed. But he didn't pay it back. The business tanked, and now that debt was toxic. That was why he wanted me to sign the waiver. The waiver contained a clause about absolving the family of any external liabilities incurred by the signatory. He was trying to trick me into retroactively accepting responsibility for the debt he had fraudulently created in my name, while simultaneously cutting me out of any assets that could pay for it. He wanted to pin the $2 million anchor around my neck and push me off the boat to save his sinking ship. He wanted me to go to prison for fraud, or to declare bankruptcy, so he could stay clean. I merged onto the highway, the speedometer climbing. I was not the loser. I was the evidence. I reached over to the passenger seat where I had tossed the folder I carried with me everywhere. Inside was the dossier my team had compiled in the last 24 hours. It contained the loan documents, the forged signatures, and the IP addresses, tracing the applications back to the computer in Warren's home office. They thought they were bringing a lamb to the slaughter. They had no idea they had just invited the butcher into the parlor. I checked the time on the dashboard. It was 9:45 at night. I had 12 hours until our meeting. 12 hours to prepare the final nail in the coffin. I would not sleep tonight. I had work to do. I had to draft the terms of surrender. "See you tomorrow, Dad," I whispered to the empty car. I turned the radio on then. The static cleared, replaced by a classic rock station. The drums kicked in. I felt a strange, cold sense of peace. I was coming home, and I was going to burn it down. I sat in the sterile silence of a hotel room suite at the DoubleTree in downtown Columbus, the glow of 3 different laptop screens illuminating my face in the dark. My suit jacket was draped over the back of a chair, and a pot of black coffee sat on the desk. It was 11:30 at night. The adrenaline from the Cedar Hollow Lodge had metabolized into a cold, hard focus. To the outside observer, my exit from the party had been a moment of triumph. But in my line of work, triumph is dangerous. It makes you sloppy. What mattered wasn't the dramatic line I delivered to my father. What mattered were the data points I had extracted in the 10 minutes prior to that exit. I replayed the scene in my head, dissecting it frame by frame, analyzing the behavior of the Kincaid family like I was watching security footage of a bank robbery. Immediately after Warren had made his loser toast and demanded I sign the document, the dynamic in the room had shifted. The guests were watching, but my family had closed ranks around me. It was a practiced maneuver, a pincer movement designed to crush dissent. Paige had been the first to move. Before I had even uncapped the pen, she had stepped into my personal space, her back to the crowd, blocking their view. She had placed a manicured hand on my arm, her fingers digging into the fabric of my blazer. "Peyton," she had whispered, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that made my skin crawl. "Please, just sign it for Dad. Do it for the peace of the family. You do not want to be the reason everyone goes home whispering. Do you? Don't make us look bad. Just sign it so we can move on." It was the classic good sister act. She was trying to frame my compliance as a moral duty to the collective image. But I noticed something else. Her eyes were darting around the room, checking the exits, checking the faces of the investors. She was terrified. Her hand on my arm was trembling slightly. Paige was a woman who never let her mask slip. So if she was shaking, the threat was existential. Then Logan had leaned in from the other side. He played the bad cop, as he always did. He smelled of scotch and arrogance. "If you cause a scene, Peyton," he had hissed, his voice low enough that only I could hear, "I will destroy you. I will tell everyone the truth about you, about how you really live." I had almost laughed then. The truth? Logan had no idea who I was. He assumed that because I wasn't flaunting wealth, I must be destitute. He assumed I was living in a trailer park, or perhaps that I had a drug problem, or that I was working some humiliating minimum wage job. He was projecting his own fears of inadequacy onto me. His threat was empty because it was based on a premise that did not exist, but the aggression behind it was real. He was desperate to silence me. And then there was Warren. The memory of my father's face was the most telling data point of all. When he had thrust that envelope at me, he had called me a leech. He had acted as if he was cutting me off to save the family fortune, but his body language told a different story. He was sweating. A thin sheen of perspiration had broken out on his upper lip, despite the air conditioning. "It is just a procedural paper," Warren had grunted, trying to sound dismissive when I hesitated. "Standard liability waiver. Nothing you need to read. Just sign it so I can stop paying for your mistakes." That was the mistake. Procedural. Standard. In the world of high-stakes finance, those are the words people use when they are trying to hide a bomb. I had looked him dead in the eye, playing the part of the naive, overwhelmed daughter. "But Dad," I had asked, pitching my voice to sound small and confused, "if I am signing away liability, how much is the loan? How much debt are you worried I might cause?" It was a trap, a simple, stupid question. Warren, flustered by my delay and the staring eyes of 200 guests, had snapped. "It is not about what you might cause. It is about what is already there. It is just a few $1,000,000. Peyton. Now sign the damn thing. Just a few $1,000,000. The air in the immediate circle had vanished. I saw Paige flinch physically, her hand dropping from my arm. I saw Logan's jaw clench so hard a muscle popped in his cheek. They had frozen. They had not wanted him to say the number. By admitting the scale, Warren had inadvertently confirmed that this was not a theoretical protection against future screw-ups. It was a frantic attempt to cover a specific, existing hole. That was the moment I had placed the pen down on the table, right next to the envelope, and in that split second, while Warren was focused on my face, I had let my hand rest on the envelope. My phone was already in my palm, camera lens facing down. I had pretended to adjust the paper, but I was actually snapping a burst of high-resolution photos of the document's header. I pulled up the image now on my center monitor. It was blurry, but readable. The logo in the corner was Sovereign Capital Trust. It was a mid-tier lender known for high-interest, short-term bridging loans, the kind of place you go when the reputable banks have already laughed you out of the building. But it was the alphanumeric code below the logo that made my stomach turn. Ref guaranteed line, P. Smith, 4490. My breath hitched. P. Smith, not W. Kincaid. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mara Ellison. Mara was a pit bull in a skirt suit, a corporate litigator based in New York, who I had worked with on 3 different hostile takeovers. It was late, but Mara didn't sleep. "Smith?" she answered on the second ring, her voice crisp. "I assume you are not calling to catch up on my dating life?" "I need a level 1 credit sweep," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "And I need a rapid liability assessment on a specific lender. Sovereign Capital Trust." "Sovereign." Mara let out a low whistle. "They are sharks. Peyton, predatory lending. Why are you swimming in that water?" "I think my father threw me in without a life vest," I said. "Run a search on my social security number, cross-reference it with Sovereign Capital. Look for anything originating from Columbus, Ohio, in the last 5 years. "Give me 3 minutes," she said. The line went silent, save for the furious clicking of her mechanical keyboard. I waited, watching the cursor blink on my screen. Outside the hotel window, the city of Columbus slept, oblivious to the war being waged in this room. "Okay," Mara's voice came back, and it was devoid of its usual sarcasm. It was grave. "Peyton, are you sitting down?" "Just tell me." "You have an open secured line of credit with Sovereign. It was opened 4 years and 2 months ago. The principal limit is $3 million. Currently, it is drawn down to $2.8 million. I closed my eyes. "I never signed for that." "Mara." "I figured," she said. "But here's the kicker. It is not just a loan. It is structured as a guarantor-backed liability. The primary borrower is listed as Kincaid Event and Lodging, but the personal guarantor is Peyton Smith. That means if the company defaults, which, looking at their payment history, they just did. Sovereign does not go after the company assets first. They come for you. They come for your personal assets, your accounts, your portfolio, your future wages. He made me the backstop, I whispered. He made you the fall guy, Mara corrected. And that waiver he tried to get you to sign tonight, I guarantee you it wasn't a waiver. If I saw the text, I bet it was a ratification. He wanted you to sign a document that acknowledged the debt was yours, disguised as a document cutting you out of the will. If you had signed that, you would have legally accepted the debt. You would have owned it. We would never be able to prove fraud. My blood ran cold. Warren wasn't just trying to humiliate me. He was trying to bankrupt me to save his own skin. He knew the business was collapsing, and he had set it up so that when the dust settled, the creditors would strip me clean while he walked away saying, "Poor Peyton. She always was bad with money." "Can they touch me?" I asked. "If we prove it is fraud." "No," Mara said. "But Sovereign is aggressive. They will freeze your assets the moment they file suit. It could take years to untangle. Your security clearance at Meridian Vale. Your reputation, it would all be suspended pending investigation. You would be dead in the water professionally." "I need proof," I said. "Irrefutable proof, not just my word against his." "You need forensics," Mara said. "I can start the legal injunctions, but you need to prove that signature is fake, and you need to do it before 10 in the morning. I am on it." I hung up and immediately opened a secure channel to Holleridge Compliance. They were a boutique firm we used at Meridian Vale for the dirty work, the deep dive due diligence that verified if a CEO was actually in the country when he signed a contract, or if a factory actually existed. I uploaded the photo of the envelope I had taken at the party. Then, I uploaded a scan of an old birthday card Warren had sent me 10 years ago, the only one I had kept. For reasons I couldn't explain, I also uploaded a copy of my own verified digital signature from a recent Meridian contract. Request comparative handwriting analysis. Authentication of P. Smith on sovereign document versus known samples. Priority immediate. I poured myself a cup of coffee. It was black sludge, but I drank it anyway. I paced the small room. My mind was racing. Warren had played a long game. He had kept me at arm's length, feeding the narrative that I was a loser, all while using my clean credit history to prop up his failing empire. He needed me to be a loser, so that no one would believe me if I challenged him. Who would believe the estranged, unsuccessful daughter over the pillar of the community? He had weaponized my isolation. My computer chimed. It was a notification from Holleridge. That was fast, even for them. I sat down and opened the secure message. The report was short. It contained a digital overlay of the signature on the sovereign document and a signature from another document found in the public records. A college loan application I had filled out 16 years ago. One of the few pieces of paper Warren would have had access to before I left, but the analyst's note at the bottom stopped my heart. Subject signature analysis. Case 99902. Peyton. We ran the algorithm. The signature on the sovereign loan document is a 99.8% match for your style. But the pressure points are wrong. It lacks the natural variance of a hand in motion. It was not written. It was traced. However, we found something else. The witness signature on the loan document, the person who legally verified that they saw you sign it, is not a notary. It is a scribbled initial. We enhanced the pen strokes. The initialization loop is distinctive. It matches the handwriting found on the Kincaid Family Trust documents we have on file from your previous background check. I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes narrowing. The witness who validated your forged signature is Paige Kincaid. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. It wasn't just Warren. Paige knew, my perfect sister. The one who had just begged me to sign for the sake of peace. The one who pretended to be the mediator she had been in the room when they stole my identity. She had held the pen. She had watched our father trace my name, and she had signed her own name next to it to make it legal. They were all in on it. I wasn't just fighting a greedy father. I was fighting a conspiracy. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Mara. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I looked at the time. It was 1 a.m. I had 9 hours until I walked into that meeting, and now I had the weapon I needed. They wanted me to be the liability fine. I would be the liability that buried them. I started typing a new email to Mara. Draft the papers, not for a defense. For a hostile acquisition of the debt based on fraudulent conveyance, and Mara add a clause for criminal referral. I hit send. The game had changed. I wasn't just going to take their company, I was going to take their freedom. The sun had barely breached the horizon when my phone rang. It was Warren. He did not apologize for the night before, nor did he acknowledge the threat I had left hanging in the air like a guillotine blade. He simply told me to meet him at the Gilded Steer, a steakhouse downtown that opened early for the power breakfast crowd, at 7:30 in the morning. "We need to talk before the meeting," he had said. His voice clipped. I agreed, not because I wanted to hear him, but because I needed to see how far he would go. The Gilded Steer was the kind of place where the leather booths were deep red and the lighting was kept dim to obscure the bloodshot eyes of hungover executives. When I walked in, the restaurant was mostly empty. Save for a few politicians carving up zoning laws over Eggs Benedict, Warren was sitting in a corner booth. He looked tired. The pristine image of the patriarch from the night before had frayed at the edges. His eyes were puffy, and he smelled faintly of breath mints and stale scotch. But when he saw me, he plastered on a smile that was terrifying in its warmth. "Peyton," he said, gesturing to the seat opposite him, "I took the liberty of ordering you coffee. Black, right? Just how you used to like it." I sat down. I had not liked black coffee since I was 20, but I didn't correct him. "What is this? Dad?" "I wanted to clear the air," Warren said, clasping his hands on the table. "Last night, emotions were high. The family is under a lot of stress. You know how it is." "I know exactly how it is," I said, my voice neutral. He pushed a plate of pastries toward me. "Look, I was harsh. Calling you a loser, that was the stress talking. Deep down, I know you have had a hard time finding your footing. That is why I want to help you." I almost laughed. The pivot was so clumsy, it was insulting. "Help me." "I am prepared to welcome you back into the fold," Warren said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I will speak to your brother and sister. We will stop the jokes. We will present a united front. I will tell the aunts and uncles that you are turning your life around." "And the price for this rehabilitation?" I asked. Warren reached into his briefcase and pulled out the envelope, the same one from the party. He slid it across the mahogany table. "Just sign the waiver," he said. "It is a show of good faith. It tells me you are not looking for a handout, that you are willing to take responsibility for your own life. You sign this. You absolve the family of any future burdens, and in return, I restore your reputation." I looked at the envelope. He was selling me my own dignity in exchange for my financial execution. "You are very eager for me to sign this before 10 in the morning, I noted. Warren twitched. "I just want a clean slate before we meet this investor you mentioned. I want to tell them that my family affairs are in order." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "What are you so afraid of? Dad, why does this specific document matter so much right now?" "I am not afraid," he lied, his eyes shifting to the left. "I just need time. We have a liquidity issue, but it is temporary. I have a new investor lined up, a big one." "Oh," I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "A private equity firm," he said, puffing out his chest. "Meridian Vale Partners. They specialize in turnarounds. They are flying in this week to finalize a capital injection. I just need to bridge the gap until they sign." I stared at him. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He was sitting across from a senior partner at Meridian Vale, lying to her about Meridian Vale coming to save him. He had no idea that the capital injection he was praying for was actually a foreclosure notice sitting in my briefcase. "Meridian Vale," I repeated slowly. "I have heard of them. They are ruthless." "They are professionals," Warren insisted. "They see the value in the Kincaid brand, but they do not like messy family dynamics. That is why I need this waiver signed. To show them we are streamlined. He was lying about the reason, but he was telling the truth about his desperation. He thought if he could present a clean liability sheet, Meridian Vale might still give him money. He didn't know the audit was already finished. "I do not know, Dad," I said, feigning hesitation. "It is a legal document. I should probably read it." "There is no time," Warren snapped, his mask slipping for a second. He composed himself quickly. "Peyton, do you want to be part of this family or not? Do you want to be the one who ruins the deal that saves us all?" I looked at the document, then at him. I needed to see exactly what was inside that envelope, but I couldn't sign it. "Give me 24 hours, I said. "No," Warren said. "Now. 24 hours, or I walk," I said, grabbing my purse as if to leave. "And if I walk, I tell this Meridian Vale contact exactly how unstable the family really is." Warren paled. The threat of sabotage terrified him more than the threat of law. "Fine," he hissed. 24 hours, but take the document. Read it. You will see, it is standard." He shoved the envelope at me. I took it. "Thank you, Dad," I said. "I will see you at 10. "Just bring the signed paper," he called after me as I walked out. "And do not be late." I walked 2 blocks to where my rental car was parked, got inside, and immediately ripped the envelope open. Inside was 5 pages of dense legal text. I scanned it, but I needed an expert eye. I snapped photos of every page and sent them to Mara. Subject: urgent review. What is the trap? I drove back to my hotel. My phone connected to the car's Bluetooth. Mara called me 10 minutes later. "Do not sign that," Mara said, her voice sharp. "Do not even touch it with your bare hands if you can avoid it. It is radioactive." "What is it?" "It is titled a waiver of inheritance, but that is a Trojan horse," Mara explained, speaking fast. "Buried in Article 4, subsection C, there is a clause for assumption of historical liabilities. It states that the signatory acknowledges that all previously opened credit lines utilizing the signatory's personal identification were authorized by the signatory, regardless of the date of origin." I gripped the steering wheel. "Translate that." "It means if you sign this, you are retroactively admitting that you opened that fraudulent $2 million line of credit with Sovereign Capital," Mara said. "You are confessing to the debt, and worse, there is an indemnity clause. If Kincaid Event and Lodging is sued for fraud regarding these loans, the signatory agrees to hold the company harmless and assume full legal defense." "He is trying to make me confess," I whispered. "He knows the bank is about to investigate the forgery," Mara said. "This document is his get-out-of-jail-free card. If you sign, he shows this to the police and says, 'See, she authorized it. She borrowed the money for the company, and now she is trying to stick us with the bill. You would go to prison for bank fraud. Peyton, he is framing you.'" I felt a wave of nausea. I had expected greed. I had expected selfishness. I had not expected him to meticulously plan my incarceration. "There is more," Mara said. "I dug into the metadata of the Sovereign Capital loan file you sent me from the investigation team. We found an email chain attached to the compliance log. It seems your brother was sloppy. Logan. He sent an email to a loan officer at Sovereign named Markinson. The subject line is Guarantor Update. The body of the email reads, 'My sister is traveling and cannot come in to sign, but she has authorized us to proceed. I am attaching her signature sample from a previous file. Please expedite. We will get the wet signature later.'" "He put it in writing," I said, stunned by the stupidity. "He put it in writing to a corrupt banker who is likely getting a kickback," Mara corrected. "But here is the twist. The timestamp on that email. It is from 4 years ago, but there is a reply from yesterday." "Yesterday." "Yes. Markinson emailed Logan yesterday morning. Audit team is sniffing around. We need that wet signature confirmation or a notarized affidavit of acceptance from her immediately, or I cannot hold them back." That was it. That was the trigger. The bank was investigating the fraud now. That was why the reunion happened. That was why Warren needed me to sign the waiver today. They weren't just clearing books for an investor. They were racing against a criminal indictment. They are cornered animals, I said. And they are dangerous, Mara warned. Peyton, I also looked into that video your sister took at the party. The one of me looking like a loser. It wasn't for social media, Mara said. I mean, she posted it, yes, but the raw file was uploaded to a cloud server shared with the family's legal counsel. They labeled it Evidence of Competency. Competency. They want to prove you were at the lodge, that you were lucid, and that you were interacting with the family, Mara explained. So if you try to claim later that you didn't know what you were signing, or that you weren't there, they have video proof of you accepting the document in front of witnesses. Page staged that entire scene to create a chain of custody for the papers. I pulled into the parking lot of the Meridian Vale satellite office in Columbus. I killed the engine and sat there, letting the fury wash over me. It was a perfect circle of betrayal. Warren drafted the trap. Logan executed the forgery. Page manufactured the social pressure and the evidence. They had turned my life into a prop in their criminal enterprise. They didn't see me as a sister or a daughter. I was just a signature with a pulse. I thought about the meeting at 10 o'clock. I thought about walking in there and revealing myself, but that wasn't enough anymore. If I just revealed I was the buyer, they might scramble, destroy evidence, or flee. I needed to close the net. I needed to make sure that when the steel jaws snapped shut, there was no wiggle room. Mara, I said, my voice steady, I need you to do something for me. I need you to contact Sovereign Capital. You want to report the fraud? No, I said. If I report the fraud now, the assets get frozen by the FBI. I can't liquidate the company if it is a crime scene. I need to own the crime scene first. Peyton, what are you asking? I want to buy the specific debt, I said. Not the company debt, the personal line of credit, the $2 million fraudulent loan. I want to buy the paper from Sovereign. Sovereign won't sell a performing loan, Mara argued. Technically, the family has been making interest payments until last month. It is not performing, I said. Markinson is terrified of an audit. Tell him a private buyer is willing to take the toxic paper off his hands at par value, no questions asked, effectively burying his mistake. He will sell to save his career. If you buy that debt, Mara said slowly, realizing the strategy, you become the creditor. You become the direct victim and the prosecutor. You can sue them for the money, or you can use the fraud to pierce the corporate veil and seize their personal assets. Exactly, I said. I don't just want the company, Mara. I want their houses. I want their cars. I want the trust funds. I want to make sure that when this is over, they don't have enough money to buy a postage stamp. It will cost you $2 million of your own cash, Mara reminded me. Company funds can't be used for a personal vendetta purchase. It is not a vendetta, I said, opening my banking app on my phone. It is an investment in justice. I hung up. I watched the minutes tick by on the dashboard clock. 8:15 in the morning. I typed out a message to my private broker, a man who handled my most aggressive, off-book transactions. I want to purchase the Sovereign Capital debt note, Ref 4490. Cash offer. Full face value, anonymous entity, execute immediately. I hit send. The phone buzzed with a reply 30 seconds later. Processing. Markinson is biting. He wants it off his books by 9. I leaned back in the seat. Warren wanted me to sign a paper accepting the debt. Instead, I was buying the debt. When I walked into that boardroom at 10 o'clock, I wouldn't just be the woman deciding if his company lived or died. I would be the woman holding the receipt for the knife he stabbed me with. I checked my makeup in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear. You wanted a savior, Dad, I whispered. You got one. I sat in the glass-walled conference room of the Meridian Vale satellite office, the city of Columbus waking up 17 floors below me. It was 8:45 in the morning. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I did not notice. My entire world had narrowed down to the data stream scrolling across the encrypted terminal Hollow Ridge Compliance had set up for me. If the discovery of the forged loan was the smoking gun, what I was looking at now was the ballistics report from a massacre. I had asked Holleridge to dig. They did not just dig, they brought in an excavator. The report was titled, Forensic Audit Kincaid Event and Lodging. Preliminary Findings. It was not a report on a struggling business. It was an autopsy of a crime scene that was still warm. The first layer of rot was the revenue recognition. It was clumsy. The kind of accounting trickery that works on a local bank manager but falls apart under the gaze of an algorithmic auditor. Kincaid Event and Lodging had booked revenue for weddings and corporate retreats that had not happened yet. In some cases, they had booked revenue for events that had been canceled. I looked at the line item for the Midwest Tech Summit. The company ledgers showed a deposit of $150,000 received last month, but when Holleridge cross-referenced the bank statements, the wire transfer never hit the account. It was a phantom entry, designed to inflate the monthly earnings report just enough to keep their existing creditors from panicking. They were lying to the banks about how much cash they had, likely to secure short-term extensions on their payroll loans. But that was just standard desperation. What came next was theft. I scrolled down to the expense ledger. There was a recurring monthly payment of $12,000 to a vendor listed as Lumina Strategic Consulting. The payments had started 3 years ago. I clicked on the hyperlink Holleridge had provided. Lumina Strategic Consulting had no website, no office address, and no employees. Its registered agent was a P.O. box in a strip mall in Dayton. But the bank account receiving the funds was interesting. The signatory on the account was a woman named Jessica Vane. I knew that name. Jessica Vane was Paige's college roommate. She was the maid of honor at Paige's first wedding. I did the math in my head. $12,000 a month. Over 36 months. That was nearly $500,000 siphoned out of the company operating budget and funneled into a shell account controlled by my sister's best friend. Logan was the CFO. He signed the checks. There was no way he did not know. This meant Logan and Paige were actively looting the company while Warren was out begging for loans. They were stealing the copper wiring out of the walls while the house was burning down. I felt a cold knot of anger tighten in my stomach. They called me a loser. They called me a leech. Yet here they were, cannibalizing their own inheritance. I moved to the next section, real estate and lease agreements. Warren always bragged that he was a genius negotiator. The data suggested otherwise. The Cedar Hollow Lodge sat on land that the company owned, but the adjacent parking structure and the guest annex were leased. I looked at the lease terms. The company was paying $40,000 a month for the annex. I pulled up the market comparisons for commercial real estate in that zip code. The average rate for similar square footage was $18,000. Warren was paying more than double the market rate. Why Holleridge had found the answer in the property deeds. The owner of the annex was a limited liability company called Green Fairway Holdings. The principal owner of Green Fairway Holdings was a man named Arthur Higgins. Arthur Higgins. I remembered him. He was Warren's golf partner. They spent every Sunday together at the country club. It was a kickback scheme. Warren overpaid rent with company money, and I had no doubt that Arthur Higgins was handing a portion of that cash back to Warren under the table. Tax-free. They were bleeding the company dry to fund their country club lifestyles. Then came the insurance fraud. The report highlighted a claim filed 6 months ago for water damage to the main ballroom floor. The claim was for $200,000. The insurance company had paid out, but Holleridge had accessed the maintenance logs. There was no record of a contractor coming in to replace the floor. There was no invoice for lumber. There was only a patch job done by the in-house handyman for $500 worth of varnish. They had pocketed the insurance money. That was a federal crime. That was wire fraud. I sat back, rubbing my temples. It was a graveyard of ethics. Every single one of them, Warren, Logan, Paige, was guilty of something that could put them behind bars. But the most chilling discovery was the one that tied it all back to me. I opened the final attachment in the folder. It was a structural analysis of the debt load. The $2 million loan they had taken out in my name, The one I had just secretly purchased was not being used for operations. It was not paying for food or staff. The funds from that specific credit line had been transferred into a segregated account labeled Contingency Liability Fund. I stared at the screen, trying to understand the logic. Why borrow money fraudulently just to let it sit in an account? Then I saw the transfer memos. Every time the company faced a lawsuit or a regulatory fine, they paid it out of my credit line. When a guest slipped and fell, paid from the Peyton Smith line. When the health inspector fined the kitchen, paid from the Peyton Smith line. They were building a containment wall. If the company ever went bankrupt, the forensic accountants would look at the books and see that the operational accounts were clean. All the bad money, all the settlements and fines, were linked to the credit line under my name. They were setting it up so that I looked like the source of the mismanagement. They could claim that I was a silent partner who had insisted on handling these issues and had botched them. They were not just stealing my credit. They were building a narrative where I was the incompetent villain who dragged the family down. My phone pinged. A new file had arrived from the investigator. Subject audio surveillance, captured via directional microphone at the reunion event. Pre-arrival. I put on my headphones. The audio was slightly grainy, mixed with the sound of wind and distant music, but the voices were unmistakable. "She is actually coming," Paige's voice said. She sounded anxious. "Good," Logan replied. "We need her here. The bank is demanding a face-to-face verification for the renewal." "What if she refuses to sign the waiver?" Paige asked. There was a pause, the sound of a lighter clicking. "Then we go to Plan B," Paige said, her voice hardening. "We leak the story that she is unstable. We say she came back demanding money, that she tried to blackmail Dad. If she does not sign, we say she destroyed the family out of spite. No one will believe the black sheep over us. We control the narrative. Logan." "Dad won't like it," Logan said. "He still thinks she can be bullied into submission." "Dad is losing his grip," Paige snapped. "If Peyton walks out of here without taking the fall, we are the ones who go to jail for the consulting fees. Do you understand that she has to be the sacrifice?" I took the headphones off. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. She has to be the sacrifice. They were discussing my destruction as casually as they discussed the catering menu. I looked at the clock. 9:15 in the morning. I had 45 minutes. I picked up the last document in the folder. It was a collection of emails Warren had sent to various relatives over the years. The investigator had flagged them for character defamation. I read an email from 3 years ago, sent to my Aunt Vivian. I tried to reach out to Peyton again. Warren wrote, "It breaks my heart. She is so jealous of Paige's success that she refuses to speak to us. She told me she hopes the business fails so she can laugh at us. I don't know where I went wrong with her. Vivian, I tried to give her everything. I stared at the words. She told me she hopes the business fails. The truth was, 3 years ago, I had sent Warren a check for $10,000 when I heard he was having cash flow issues. He had returned it, torn in half, with a note that said, 'Keep your pity money. Do not come back until you learn respect.' He had lied to everyone. He had painted me as the bitter, jealous exile to cover up the fact that he had driven me away. He needed the family to hate me so that when he finally threw me under the bus, they would cheer." I stood up and walked to the window. I had enough. I had the fraud. I had the theft. I had the conspiracy. I could call Mara right now. I could have the police waiting in the lobby of the Meridian Vale building. I could have them arrested before they even stepped off the elevator. It would be swift. It would be just, but it would be too easy. If I arrested them now, they would play the victim. They would cry to the press that they were misunderstood, that it was a misunderstanding. They would use their lawyers to delay the trial for years. No. They were coming to this meeting expecting a savior. They were expecting Meridian Vale to pour millions of dollars into their empty accounts. They believed that if they could just bluff their way through this one meeting, they would be safe. I wanted to see the light go out in their eyes. I wanted them to sit in that room, thinking they had won, and then realize that the person across the table, the person holding their fate, was the daughter they had called a loser. I wanted to dismantle them piece by piece, not with handcuffs, but with the truth. I went back to the desk and packed the files into my leather portfolio. I made sure the audio recording was queued up on my laptop. I made sure the loan transfer documents were printed in high definition. I was ready to leave when my secure terminal beeped one last time. Priority message. Hollow Ridge Field Agent. I opened it. Peyton, we have a situation. We are monitoring the internal communications at Kincaid HQ. There is a breach in their wall of silence. Someone inside the executive office knows about the audit. They know about the forged loan. They just sent an encrypted email to your public Meridian Vale address not knowing it is you, but knowing Meridian is the potential buyer. The message reads, I have the original ledgers. I know where the bodies are buried. I am not going down with Warren Kincaid. I want immunity in exchange for the files. The sender is using a burner account, but we trace the IP. It is coming from the office of Evan Rourke, the operations manager. I froze. Evan Rourke. He was the one decent man in that entire building. He had been with the company since my grandfather started it. He had taught me how to ride a bike in the lodge parking lot when I was 6. He had snuck me candy when Warren sent me to my room without dinner. I thought he was loyal to Warren. I thought he was part of the old guard, but it seemed even loyalty had a limit when the ship was sinking. If Evan was flipping, it meant the collapse was imminent. It meant he had evidence that even I didn't have. I typed a quick reply to the investigator. Tell him to meet me. Not at the office. Tell him to come to the service entrance of the Meridian building in 20 minutes. Tell him the buyer wants to talk. I snapped the laptop shut. The game was no longer just about revenge. It was about salvage. I could not save my family. But maybe, just maybe, I could save the one person who had actually been kind to me. I walked out of the conference room, my heels clicking on the marble floor. It was time to go to work. The service entrance of the Meridian Vale building was a concrete wind tunnel, smelling faintly of diesel exhaust and damp cardboard. I stood in the shadow of the delivery bay, checking my watch. It was 9:20 in the morning. A gray sedan pulled up to the curb. The driver's door opened, and Evan Rourke stepped out. I had not seen Evan in 5 years, and the change was heartbreaking. He had been a robust man, the kind who could lift a keg of beer with one hand and calm an angry bride with the other. Now, he looked hollowed out. His shoulders were slumped, his hair was thinning, and he held a thick manila envelope against his chest like a shield. He saw me and hesitated. I stepped into the light. Hello, Evan, I said softly. Peyton, he breathed, his voice cracking. He looked around nervously, checking for cameras, checking for spies. Or should I say, Ms. Smith? Peyton is fine, I said. You look tired, Evan. I am tired, he admitted. He walked over and handed me the envelope. I have worked for your father for 30 years. I missed my son's baseball games for that company. I missed my anniversary dinners. I thought we were a team. What changed? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. He called a meeting yesterday afternoon, Evan said, his eyes hard. Just the senior managers. He told us that the audit was coming. He told us that mistakes had been made. Evan paused, rubbing his face with a trembling hand. He handed out a memo. It outlines a narrative for the investigators. He wants us to sign statements saying that the accounting discrepancies were clerical errors made by the junior staff. He wants us to blame the kids, Peyton, the 22-year-olds we just hired. He wants to say they were incompetent and that he, the benevolent CEO, was just too trusting. I opened the envelope. The memo was there, printed on Kincaid letterhead. Subject: Internal Compliance Review Strategy. It was a script for scapegoating the innocent to protect the guilty. He is going to fire them, Evan whispered. He is going to fire the kids and pin the fraud on them so he and Logan can walk away clean. I can't do it. Peyton, I can't ruin those kids' lives. I looked at the signature at the bottom of the memo. Warren Kincaid. You won't have to, I said, looking up at Evan. I am buying the debt, Evan, all of it, by noon today. I will control the company. Evan's eyes widened. Me, I said. But I need to know something. If I take over, If I clean house, are you willing to stand up in a courtroom and testify that Warren wrote this memo? Are you willing to say that Logan knew about the consulting fees? Evan straightened his spine. For a moment, he looked like the man I remembered. If you protect my staff, he said, if you promise me that the innocent ones keep their jobs. I promise, I said. When I walk into that room, nobody gets fired except the people named Kincaid. Evan nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. Logan tried to wipe the server this morning. He thought he deleted the transaction history for the shell companies. This is the backup. I took the drive. It was cold metal in my palm. It was the final nail. Go home, Evan, I said. Turn off your phone. Do not come to the office until I call you. He nodded again, turned, and got back into his car. I watched him drive away. Then I turned and walked back into the building. I had a meeting to arrange. I took the private elevator up to the top floor. My office at Meridian Vale was a fortress of glass and steel, a stark contrast to the faux rustic warmth of the Cedar Hollow Lodge. Mara was waiting for me, 2 stacks of documents arranged on the conference table. The transaction is complete, she said without preamble. We used a blind LLC called Obsidian Holdings. The bank was so happy to get the non-performing loan off their books, they practically gift-wrapped it. We now own 80% of the Kincaid event and lodging debt structure. And the personal line? I asked. Secured, Mara said. You are the primary creditor on all fronts. You own the mortgage on the lodge, the liens on the equipment, and the personal guarantee that Warren fraudulently signed your name to. I sat down and looked at the 2 stacks of paper. Tell me about the doors, I said. Mara tapped the left stack. Door number 1, the conditional rescue. This is a restructuring agreement. It strips Warren, Logan, and Page of all executive titles and voting rights. It transfers 100% of the equity to Meridian Vale. In exchange, we agree not to press criminal charges immediately, provided they cooperate with a forensic audit and pay back the misappropriated funds over time. It is the mercy option. She tapped the right stack. It was thicker. Door number 2, she said darkly. The scorched earth. Immediate foreclosure. We file the fraud evidence with the SEC and the district attorney. We freeze their personal assets today. We evict them from the lodge. We publicly disclose the embezzlement. They go to prison, and the company likely liquidates. I want them to choose, I said. I want them to see both options. They will fight, Mara warned. Warren still thinks he has leverage. Warren thinks he is meeting a stranger, I corrected. He thinks he is coming here to charm a suit. He has no idea he is walking into an execution. I opened my laptop. It was time to set the stage. I drafted an email. I sent it to Warren's personal address, using the generic investor relations alias we had set up for Obsidian Holdings. Subject regarding acquisition of Kincaid debt portfolio. Mr. Kincaid, our firm has acquired your outstanding liabilities from Sovereign Capital and the regional syndicates. We are aware of the time-sensitive nature of your liquidity crisis. We are willing to discuss a path forward that ensures the continuity of the business. Please present yourself and your executive team at the Meridian Vale offices at 10 in the morning today. Do not be late. Representative for Obsidian Holdings. I hit send. According to Evan's text messages, the reaction was instantaneous. 10 miles away, at the Kincaid estate, Warren read the email and shouted for joy. He called Logan. I told you, he reportedly yelled. I told you I would fix it. A new firm bought the debt. They want to ensure continuity. That means they want us to stay running. They need us. It was exactly what I wanted him to think. He interpreted continuity of the business as continuity of the Kincaids. He could not conceive of a world where the business existed without him. Paige went into overdrive. She sent a message to the family group chat which Evan was still a part of, instructing everyone to post positive vibes on social media. Action item. She wrote, "We need to look strong before the meeting. I'm going to edit a video of us from the reunion. Just the happy parts. Smiling faces. Family unity. I will caption it. Stronger together. If the investors check our socials, they need to see a dynasty, not a disaster. I watched from my office as the notification popped up on Instagram 20 minutes later. There it was, a montage of the party. The music was uplifting. There was a shot of Warren toasting, a shot of Logan laughing, a shot of Paige hugging a cousin. They had edited me out completely. It was as if I had never been there. While Paige was polishing the lie, Logan was trying to bury the truth. Evan's next text confirmed it. It just alerted me. Logan is running a military-grade deletion program on the finance drive. He thinks it is gone. I smiled. Let him think it. The more confident they were, the harder they would fall. I stood up and walked to the closet in my office. I had brought a change of clothes. The suit I had worn to the party was passive. It was the suit of a guest. Today, I needed a uniform. I chose a charcoal gray suit, tailored to within an inch of its life. The fabric was sharp, the lines severe. I wore a white silk blouse underneath, buttoned to the collar, no necklace, no earrings. My hair was pulled back into a tight, low bun. I looked in the mirror. I did not look like Peyton the daughter. I did not look like the girl who used to cry when her father raised his voice. I looked like a machine. I looked like the personification of a margin call. "Are we ready?" Mara asked, standing by the door. She looked nervous. She had seen me take down CEOs before, but she knew this was personal. "We are ready," I said. I checked the time. 9:50 in the morning. "They are in the lobby," the receptionist called over the intercom. "Mr. Warren Kincaid and 2 others. They say they have an appointment with the Obsidian representative." "Send them up," I said. "But Sarah." "Yes, Ms. Smith." "When they get to the waiting area outside the boardroom," I said, my voice steady, "do not let them in immediately." "How long should I hold them?" Sarah asked. 7 minutes, I said. 7 minutes. Exactly 7 minutes, I confirmed. "Offer them water, but do not give it to them. Tell them the partners are finishing a call. Make them sit there. Make them wait." "Understood." I cut the connection. 7 minutes. It was a psychological lifetime in the corporate world. 5 minutes was a standard delay. 10 minutes was an insult that made people angry. But 7 minutes. 7 minutes was confusing. It was just long enough to make the adrenaline fade and the anxiety set in. It was enough time for Warren to adjust his tie 3 times. Enough time for Paige to check her makeup and realize the lighting was unflattering. Enough time for Logan to wonder if the deletion program had actually worked. I wanted them to stew in that silence. I wanted them to listen to the hum of the air conditioning and the sound of their own heartbeats. I wanted them to realize, on a subconscious level, that they were no longer in charge. I walked over to the boardroom. The walls were soundproof glass, but I had activated the privacy frost. They would not be able to see inside. I laid the documents out on the table, the forged loan, the forensic audit, the scapegoat memo, the flash drive. I took my seat at the head of the table. The leather chair was high-backed and imposing. I placed my hands flat on the polished wood surface. I watched the digital clock on the wall tick down. 9:53. They were in the elevator. 9:54. They were stepping into the reception area. 9:55. Sarah was telling them to wait. I could imagine Warren's indignation. "Do they know who I am?" he would demand. But he would sit, because he needed the money. 9:58. The silence in the waiting room would be deafening. 10 o'clock. The meeting time. The door remained closed. 10:01. Logan would be checking his watch. 10:02. Paige would be tapping her foot. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I thought about the 16-year-old girl who had packed her car in the dark. I thought about the loser toast. I thought about the signature they stole. 10:05. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. The clock clicked to 10:06. I pressed the button under the table that signaled Sarah to open the doors. The heavy magnetic locks disengaged with a solid thud. I did not stand up. I did not smile. I just watched the door handle turn. The Kincaids were walking into the lion's den, and they had forgotten to bring a weapon. To understand why I made my father wait exactly 7 minutes in that lobby, You have to understand what happened in the 18 hours leading up to that moment. While I was assembling the legal cage that would trap them, the Kincaid family was not sitting idle. They were launching a preemptive strike designed to destroy my credibility before I could even open my mouth. It started the night before, shortly after I left the steakhouse. I was back in the war room at the hotel when my phone began to vibrate. It was not a call. It was a deluge of notifications. Instagram, Facebook, text messages from numbers I had not seen in a decade. Paige had pulled the trigger on her social media campaign. I opened Instagram, and there it was. A video clip titled, "The Heartbreak of a Prodigal Daughter." It was a masterclass in manipulation. Paige had taken the footage from the reunion, but she had butchered the timeline. She had cut out Warren's loser toast. She had cut out the moment he threw the envelope at me. She had cut out the crowd's cruel laughter. All that remained was a tight close-up of Warren looking tired and emotional, followed by a jump cut to me smiling that cold, dead smile. Then, a cut to me walking away while Warren stood with his head in his hands. The caption read, "We tried to welcome her home with open arms. We offered her a fresh start. Instead, she laughed at our father's generosity and threatened to destroy the family legacy because of her own bitterness. It is hard to love someone who only wants to hurt you. Please pray for the Kincaid family as we deal with this betrayal." It went viral within the local Columbus circle instantly. The comments were a cesspool. Some people are just toxic. Poor Warren, he does not deserve that. I always knew she was the bad apple. My phone buzzed with a text from a cousin I had not spoken to since I was 12. "How could you do that to Uncle Warren? You should be ashamed." Another from an old neighbor. "You are a monster. They were poisoning the well. They knew that if I came forward with allegations of fraud, it would look like the vindictive rantings of the unstable daughter they had already warned the community about. They were inoculating the public against the truth." I did not reply to a single message. I just took screenshots. Every lie they posted was another brick in the wall of their own prison. Then came the legal threat. At 2 a.m, an email landed in my inbox from Logan. It was sent from his corporate account, marked urgent. Subject, cease and desist. Notice of intent to sue Peyton. We are aware that you may be in possession of sensitive company documents. Be advised that any dissemination of proprietary information, financial data, or internal correspondence will be met with immediate litigation for corporate espionage and defamation. We have retained counsel. If you say one word to our investors or the press, we will bury you in legal fees for the next 20 years. Do not test us. I laughed out loud in the empty hotel room. It was rich coming from a man who had embezzled $500,000 in consulting fees. He was threatening me with a lawsuit for exposing crimes he was currently committing, but the fear beneath the threat was palpable. They were terrified. They were flailing in the dark, swinging at shadows, unaware that the shadow was already holding a knife to their throat. The attacks escalated the next morning. I left the Meridian Vale satellite office briefly at 7 a.m. to grab a fresh coffee from the shop across the street. The city was gray and drizzling. As I walked, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. It is a sensation you develop after years of corporate intelligence work, the feeling of eyes on your skin. I stopped at the crosswalk and glanced at the reflection in a shop window. A dark gray sedan was idling 2 cars back. It had been there when I left the hotel. It had been there when I parked at the office. Warren had hired a private investigator. It was sloppy work. The man behind the wheel was not even trying to hide. He was holding up a camera with a telephoto lens. This was not surveillance. It was intimidation. They wanted me to know I was being watched. They wanted me to feel unsafe. They wanted me to think that they could reach me anywhere. I turned around and looked directly at the car. I raised my coffee cup in a mock toast. The driver panicked and looked away. Pretending to check his phone, I walked back into the building, my resolve hardening into diamond. They thought sending a rent-a-cop to follow me would scare me off. It only confirmed that they had something massive to hide. I went straight to Mara. "They are getting aggressive," I said, tossing my phone onto the table with the video Paige had posted. "They are shaping the narrative that I am the aggressor." Mara picked up the phone and watched the clip. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses. "This is good," she said. "Good? It is actionable," Mara said, her fingers already flying across her laptop keyboard. "Paige is not a video editor. She used a consumer app. I can see the digital artifacts from the splicing." Mara ran a quick extraction program on the video file. "Look at the metadata," she pointed out. "The timestamp on the clip of Warren looking sad. That was taken at 8:15 at night. The timestamp on the clip of you smiling, 9:10 at night. She stitched two events together that happened nearly an hour apart to create a false cause and effect." "We know that," I said. "But the public does not." "The court will," Mara said viciously. "But here is the real weapon, the audio track." She muted the background noise to make it dramatic, but she did not strip the original audio file from the container. Mara clicked a few buttons and isolated a waveform. "Listen." She played the raw audio from the clip of Warren. It was faint, but audible. "Just sign the damn thing. Peyton, I do not care about your feelings. I care about the money." Mara looked up at me, a wolfish grin on her face. "She accidentally uploaded the evidence of coercion. By trying to frame you, she just gave us a recording of Warren admitting that the waiver was about money, not family values, and she posted it publicly. It is admissible." "Save it," I said. "Save everything. We play it for them in the room." My phone rang again. It was Warren. I hesitated, then answered. I put it on speaker so Mara could hear. "Peyton?" Warren's voice came through. It was different than it had been at the steakhouse. The arrogance was gone. It was replaced by a tremor of genuine panic. "Hello, Dad?" "I saw the video Paige posted," he stammered. "I told her to take it down. That was not my idea." "It is a little late for that," I said. "It has 3,000 views." "I can fix this," Warren pleaded. "I can make it go away. I can tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. But you have to stop. I know you are up to something. I can feel it." "What am I up to, Dad?" "You are digging," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You are looking at things you do not understand. Business is complicated. Peyton, sometimes we have to move numbers around to survive. It is not black and white." "Fraud is pretty black and white," I said. There was a silence on the line, a heavy, terrified silence. "What do you want?" Warren asked. "Money, is that it? You want a payoff. I can write you a check. 10,020. "I do not want your money," I said. "Then what?" he screamed, his control snapping. "What do you want?" "I want the truth," I said. "I want you to walk into that meeting today and tell the investors exactly what you did with my name." "I can't do that," he whispered. "They will ruin me." "Then you have a choice to make," I said. "See you at 10. I hung up. A few minutes later, Evan sent a text message from his burner phone. "Red alert. Warren just called an emergency prep session in the limo on the way to your office. He is instructing Logan and Paige to stick to the rogue daughter script. If the investors ask about the debt in your name, they are going to say you stole the company identity to fund a gambling addiction." I stared at the screen. A gambling addiction. That was their new lie. They were going to accuse me of a vice I had never touched to cover their own theft. "They are going to lie to the buyer," I told Mara. "They are going to walk into this room and lie to my face, not knowing it is my face." "Then let them," Mara said. "Let them dig the hole so deep they can never climb out." I stood up and walked to the window. The gray sedan was still down there. The city was waking up. The clock was ticking toward 10. I had given them every chance. I had given them the option to be honest at the reunion. I had given Warren an off-ramp at the steakhouse. I had even answered the phone just now, giving him one last moment to confess. Instead, they chose to attack. They chose to smear. They chose to lie. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Warren's personal number. He must have sent it from the car, just minutes before arriving at the building. "If you embarrass me today, if you ruin this deal, you are no longer my daughter. I will disown you for real this time." I looked at the words. They were meant to hurt. They were meant to trigger that little girl inside me who just wanted her father to be proud. But the little girl was gone. She had died somewhere between the credit fraud and the viral video. I typed my reply. I did not hesitate. My thumbs moved with the precision of a surgeon. You did that long ago. I hit send. Then I turned off my phone and placed it on the conference table. It is time, I said to Mara. We walked to the boardroom. I sat at the head of the table. I signaled the receptionist. Make them wait 7 minutes. I wanted those 7 minutes to be the longest of their lives. I wanted them to sit in that lobby, checking their phones, seeing that I had not replied to the threats, wondering why the investor was making them wait. I wanted the fear to marinate, because when those doors opened, I wasn't going to be their daughter, I wasn't going to be their sister, I was going to be the consequences. The digital clock on the wall of the private observation room ticked over to 10:06 in the morning. On the high-definition monitor in front of me, I watched the live feed from the reception area. It was a study in deteriorating composure. Warren was pacing the small waiting area, checking his gold Rolex for the 5th time in 2 minutes. He straightened his tie, then smoothed his hair, then scowled at the receptionist who was placidly typing behind the glass desk. "This is ridiculous," Warren muttered, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "Who do these people think they are? We are Kincaid Event and Lodging. We do not wait for venture capitalists. They wait for us." Logan was sitting on the edge of the sofa, his leg bouncing nervously. He was clutching his briefcase so tightly his knuckles were white. "Just relax, Dad. Maybe they are testing us. It is a power move." "It is disrespectful," Warren spat. "When I get in there, I am going to remind them that I have been in this business for 40 years. Paige was checking her phone, likely refreshing the comments on her hit piece video. She looked up, annoyed. "Dad, stop pacing. You are making me sweat." 10:07 in the morning. I pressed the intercom button. "Send them in. Sarah." I stood up and walked from the observation room into the boardroom, through the side executive door. I closed it behind me just as the main double doors at the far end of the long mahogany table swung open. I stood at the head of the table, my hands clasped behind my back. I wore the charcoal suit, the silk blouse, and absolutely no jewelry. I was not Peyton the daughter. I was the institution. Warren strode in first, his chest puffed out, a practiced smile plastered onto his face, ready to charm the mysterious savior. "Gentlemen," Warren began, his voice booming. "I apologize if we were—" He stopped. The smile slid off his face like wet paint. He froze mid-step, his eyes widening as they adjusted to the light streaming in from the floor-to-ceiling windows. He blinked, once, twice, as if his brain refused to process the visual data. Logan walked into Warren's back, stumbling slightly. "Dad, what is the—" Logan looked up. His mouth fell open. He dropped his briefcase. It hit the floor with a heavy thud that echoed in the silent room. Paige was the last to enter. She pushed past Logan, irritated. "Why did we stop?" "Let's just—" She saw me. Her face went slack. The color drained out of her cheeks so fast it looked like a medical event. For 10 seconds. The only sound in the room was the hum of the hard drives in the server rack. "What are you doing here?" Paige whispered, her voice trembling. "How did you get past security?" "You followed us," Logan accused, his voice rising an octave. He took a step forward, his shock turning into aggression. "You crazy stalker! You followed us here to ruin the meeting. Get out!" "Security." Warren found his voice. It was a low growl. "Peyton, I told you, if you embarrass me today—" "Sit down," I said. My voice was not loud. It was not emotional. It was the voice I used when I fired a CEO who had lied about his earnings. It was absolute. "I said get out," Warren shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the door. "This is a private meeting with Obsidian Holdings. You are trespassing." "I am Obsidian Holdings," I said. The silence returned. Heavier this time. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of the track. "That is impossible," Logan stammered. "Obsidian is a private equity firm. You work in data entry." "I am a senior partner at Meridian Vale," I corrected him, moving to the chair at the head of the table. I pulled it out and sat down. "And Obsidian Holdings is the special purpose vehicle I created at 9 o'clock last night to acquire your debt." I opened the leather folder in front of me and slid a single sheet of paper down the long table. It glided across the polished wood and came to a stop right in front of Warren. "That is the transfer of ownership note from Sovereign Capital," I said. "And the one underneath it is the acquisition of your equipment liens from the regional bank. I own your mortgage, I own your payroll loans, and I own you." Warren looked down at the paper. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't pick it up. He stared at the signature line, "Obsidian Holdings, LLC, authorized signatory Peyton Smith." He looked up at me, his eyes glassy. He looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 seconds. "You," he whispered, "you bought the debt." "I told you last night," I said, leaning back. I said, "Meet the person saving this family tomorrow. You just assumed I was lying because it didn't fit your narrative." "But where did you get the money?" Paige asked, her voice shrill. "You are broke. You are a loser." "I have never been broke, Paige," I said. "I just didn't need to buy a Porsche to feel important." I picked up a remote control and pointed it at the massive screen behind me. "Now," I said, "let's discuss the terms of your surrender. But before we do, I think we need to establish the baseline of truth, since you seem to have trouble with it on social media." I pressed play. The screen flared to life. It was the footage from the reunion. But it wasn't Paige's edited version. It was the raw file from the camera crew I had subpoenaed earlier that morning, the videographer they had hired for the party, who was all too happy to sell the raw footage to a legal firm. Warren's voice boomed through the surround sound speakers. "I am proud of all my children except for the losers standing by the bar." The room watched as the guests laughed. They watched Warren sneer. They watched him shove the envelope at me. "Sign it. For good." And then, the camera zoomed in on me. "But tomorrow, 10 in the morning. Dad, you come meet the person saving this family first." I paused the video on the frame of Warren's confused face. "You edited this clip to make me look like a monster," I said to Paige. "You tried to destroy my reputation to cover your tracks, but you forgot that when you hire a professional videographer, the raw files belong to the person who pays for them. And since I just bought the company, I paid for them." Paige shrank into her chair, pulling her coat tighter around herself. "That is just a video," Logan said, trying to regain his footing. "It proves nothing except that Dad was stressed. It is not illegal to be mean." "No," I agreed. "Being mean is not illegal, but this is—" I clicked the remote again. The screen changed. A document appeared. It was the loan application for the $2 million credit line with Sovereign Capital. Next to it, I projected the email Logan had sent to the banker. From Logan Kincaid to Markinson. Sovereign Capital subject. Guarantor update. My sister is traveling. I am attaching her signature sample. We will get the wet signature later. Logan made a noise like a strangled cat. He stared at the screen, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. "And this?" I continued, clicking again. The screen changed to a flow chart of bank transfers. Source Kincaid operating account. Destination Lumina Strategic Consulting. Beneficiary Jessica Vane. Total transferred $480,000. I looked at Paige. "Lumina Strategic Consulting, your roommate's shell company. You have been billing the company $12,000 a month for brand strategy while the business was failing. That is embezzlement. Paige, that is grand larceny." Paige burst into tears. It wasn't a dignified cry. It was the ugly and heaving sob of a child who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar. "I didn't know Logan told me it was legal. He said it was tax optimization." "Shut up, Paige," Logan shouted. "Enough," Warren roared. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the water glasses. He stood up, his face purple with rage. "You tapped my phones," Warren screamed at me. "You hacked my servers. This is illegal. You are spying on your own family. I will have you arrested." I did not flinch. I did not blink. I did not spy on you. "Dad," I said calmly. I conducted due diligence on an asset I purchased. I read the books, my books, and it just so happened that your books were full of crimes. You have no right, Warren sputtered. I have every right. I cut him off. I am your creditor. I am the only reason the FBI is not kicking down that door right now. I am the only reason you are not in handcuffs. I stood up. The movement was sudden enough that Warren flinched and sat back down. I walked over to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. I drew a vertical line down the center. You have two options, I said. And only two. There is no negotiation. There is no, let me think about it. You decide before you leave this room. I wrote a large letter A on the left side. Option A, I said. The clean break. I turned to face them. Warren, you resign as CEO immediately. You retire. You sign over your voting shares to the restructuring trust I control. You keep the house, but you lose the company jet, the country club membership, and the expense account. I looked at Logan and Paige. You two resign. You sign a confession of judgment admitting to the embezzlement and the fraud. You agree to a repayment plan. I will garnish your future wages until every cent of that $480,000 is paid back. In exchange, I will seal the evidence. No police, no prison. I will keep the company running. I will keep the staff employed. I will save the Kincaid name, even though none of you deserve it. I wrote a large letter B on the right side. Option B, I said. The nuclear option. I call the debt immediately. You cannot pay. So I foreclose. I take the lodge. I take the land. I take your personal homes because you signed personal guarantees, and yes, the fraud invalidates your corporate shield. I hand this entire file. I tap the folder. To the district attorney, Logan and Paige go to prison for bank fraud and embezzlement. Warren, you go down for conspiracy and insurance fraud. I capped the marker and set it down. So, I said, do you want to be poor and free, or do you want to be poor and in prison? The room was silent. You could hear the traffic from the street 17 floors below. Warren looked at Logan, who was staring at his shoes. He looked at Paige, who was wiping mascara off her cheeks. Then he looked at me. His eyes were filled with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. He realized, for the first time in his life, that he was not the smartest person in the room. You are destroying this family, Warren whispered. His voice was trembling, trying to summon one last ounce of paternal guilt. I am your father. Peyton, how can you do this? You are ripping us apart. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had ignored me for 16 years. I looked at the man who had called me a loser in front of 200 people. I looked at the man who had stolen my identity to save his own ego. I am not destroying the family, Dad, I said. The family was destroyed the day you decided love was conditional on a bank balance. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table, invading his space. And I am not doing this to hurt you, I said softly. I am doing this because for 34 years, you have used me as a scapegoat. You needed someone to be the failure so you could feel like a success. You needed someone to be the liability so you could be the asset. I straightened up and buttoned my jacket. I am just stopping being the sacrifice, I said. I looked at my watch. You have 5 minutes to decide, I said. After that, I call the police. I turned and walked toward the window, putting my back to them. I watched the rain falling on Columbus. I did not need to see their faces. I knew what they would choose. Cowards always choose survival. Behind me, I heard the sound of a pen scratching on paper. I did not have to be in the Kincaid living room to know that the walls were shaking. I had eyes and ears everywhere now. They had left the Meridian Vale offices in a stupor, walking out into the rain like 3 people who had just survived a plane crash only to realize they were stranded on a desert island with no water. They drove back to Cedar Hollow in silence. But the moment the heavy oak doors of the family estate closed behind them, the truce disintegrated. Evan Rourke was my fly on the wall. He was still in the loop on the internal security feeds, and he was texting me play-by-play updates as if he were broadcasting a sporting event. though this was a sport where the players were trying to eat each other alive. According to Evan, the explosion started in the library. Warren, fueled by humiliation and the terror of option B, the option that ended with him in a prison jumpsuit, turned on Logan the second they walked in. "You are the chief financial officer," Warren screamed, his voice cracking. "You were supposed to hide the paper trail. How did she find the emails? How did she find the consulting fees? You are incompetent." Logan, who had spent his entire life cowering before our father, finally snapped. The pressure of the looming indictment had dissolved his loyalty. "Me?" Logan shouted back. "You signed everything. Dad, you are the one who told me to fix the cash flow by any means necessary. You are the one who forged her signature on the sovereign loan because you were too proud to declare bankruptcy 4 years ago. Do not put this on me. I just followed orders." Then Paige chimed in, playing the role she had perfected since kindergarten, the innocent bystander. "Stop fighting," she wailed. "I have nothing to do with the numbers. I am just the vice president of communications. I just do the PR. I am a victim here. If Peyton goes to the police, I am telling them I knew nothing." I sat in my hotel room, reading the transcript Evan sent. I shook my head. Paige really believed her own lies. I opened my laptop and forwarded a single document to Paige's personal email address, copying Warren and Logan. It was the incorporation paper for Lumina Strategic Consulting, showing the direct IP address link to Paige's home computer. Subject: The Victim Narrative, Body. "You created the shell company. Paige, you invoiced the hours. You withdrew the cash. You are not a victim. You are a co-conspirator. Save the acting for the jury." The fighting in the Kincaid house reportedly stopped for a full minute as they checked their phones. Then, the screaming started again. But this time, it was circular. They were a pack of wolves that had run out of prey. So they turned on their own flanks. By 2 p.m, the external world began to collapse around them. The rumor mill in Columbus is efficient. I had not leaked anything to the press, but the mere presence of Warren Kincaid looking ashen-faced at the Meridian Vale offices had sparked chatter. "The investors are pulling out." Evan texted me at 3:30. "The rumor is that Kincaid Event and Lodging is under federal audit. 3 corporate clients just canceled their holiday parties. They are citing a morality clause in their contracts. They are terrified of being associated with a scandal." The continuity Warren had bragged about was evaporating. The business was bleeding out, and I was the only surgeon with a tourniquet, but they were too busy stabbing each other to let me apply it. Then came the calls. My phone lit up with Warren's name. I let it ring. He called again, and again, 17 times in 1 hour. Finally, he switched to voicemail. I listened to them later. It was a fascinating study in the stages of grief. Voicemail 1. "Peyton, pick up. We need to be reasonable. You are making a mistake." Denial. Voicemail 5. "You ungrateful brat. After everything I gave you, a roof over your head, piano lessons." Anger. Voicemail 12. "Please, honey, just talk to me. We can work something out. I will give you a seat on the board. I will fire Logan if that is what you want." Bargaining. Voicemail 17. "God help you. Peyton, you are killing your mother's legacy." That last one made me pause. My mother's legacy. He had the audacity to invoke the name of the woman he had emotionally neglected for 20 years until she died of a stroke. I sent him a single text message. "Choose option A or option B. You have 24 hours left." At 6 p.m, my burner phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. "Hello?" "Peyton," a hushed voice whispered. "It is Logan. I have nothing to say to you, Logan." "Wait, do not hang up," he pleaded. He sounded like he was hiding in a closet. "I can help you. I know you want Dad. I know he is the target. You are all the targets. Logan? But I can give you more," Logan said, his voice trembling with desperation. "I can give you Paige. I have emails where she talks about editing that video to frame you. I have recordings of her laughing about using your credit score. I can testify against her and Dad. Just cut me a deal. Let me keep my house. My wife is pregnant. Peyton, please. I felt a wave of disgust so potent I almost gagged. He was offering up his twin sister to save his real estate portfolio. He was using his unborn child as a bargaining chip for a crime he willingly committed. You want to sell Paige to save yourself? I asked. She is the one who pushed for the video. Logan rationalized. She is the one who made it personal. I was just the money guy. I am useful to you. Peyton, I can run the books while you restructure. Logan, I said, my voice ice cold. You are missing the point. I am not looking for a new accomplice. I am looking for accountability. No one gets to escape by pushing someone else off the ledge. You jump together. I hung up and blocked the number. The night deepened. I ordered room service but could not eat. The victory tasted like ash. I had won. Yes, I had them cornered, but the sheer magnitude of their moral rot was exhausting. Was there not a single redeemable molecule in my entire bloodline? Then, a knock on my door at 8 o'clock. I checked the peephole. It was Aunt Vivian. I opened the door. Vivian was 62, the quiet sister, the one who always sat in the back at reunions and knitted. She looked terrified, clutching a wet umbrella and a plastic shopping bag. May I come in? She asked. Of course, Aunt Viv. She sat on the edge of the bed, refusing to take off her coat. She looked at me with watery eyes. I heard what happened. Warren called me. He's trying to rally the family. He told everyone you are mentally ill, that you are hallucinating crimes. Do you believe him? I asked. No, Vivian said firmly. She reached into the plastic bag. Because I know who Warren is, and I know what he did to your mother. She pulled out a thick, yellowed envelope. It smelled of mildew and old cedar chests. Your mother gave me this 3 weeks before she died, Vivian said, her hands shaking. She made me promise to hide it. She said Warren would burn it if he found it. She told me to give it to you when you were strong enough to fight him. I was too scared to give it to you when you left home at 18. I thought you were too young. I am sorry. Peyton? I took the envelope. Inside was a document with an official notary seal from 1995. It was a last will and testament, my mother's will. I read the legal text. My mother had come from old money that Warren had married into. I always assumed that money had been absorbed into the company decades ago. But there, in Article 5, was a clause that made my heart stop. To my daughter, Peyton, I leave the title and deed to the 40 acres of land upon which the Cedar Hollow Lodge is built. This land is to be held in trust until her 25th birthday, at which point full ownership transfers to her. This asset is separate from the marital estate and is not to be commingled with Kincaid event and lodging assets. I looked up at Vivian, gasping for air. I own the land. You have owned it for 9 years, Vivian whispered. Warren hid the will. He probated a fake version that left everything to him. He has been paying rent to himself for land that belongs to you. This changed everything. I wasn't just a creditor holding a loan. I was the landlord. The lodge, the physical building, was sitting on my dirt. Warren had been trespassing on my property for almost a decade. He stole my inheritance, I said, the rage burning hotter than before. He was afraid, Vivian said. He knew if you had the land, you had the power. He needed you to feel small so he could feel big. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Warren to the entire extended family group chat, a chat I was not in. But Vivian was. She showed me her screen. Warren family. We need to stand together against Peyton. She is attacking us with lies. We need to shun her. Anyone who speaks to her is aiding the enemy. We must protect the Kincaid name. Vivian took her phone back. She typed a reply in the group chat, her fingers trembling but determined. Vivian, stop lying. Warren, I just gave Peyton her mother's real will. We know about the land. It is over. I watched the screen. 3 dots appeared as Warren typed, then stopped, then typed, then stopped. He had no rebuttal. The contradictions were too glaring. He couldn't claim I was a loser while simultaneously hiding the fact that I was the heiress to the family's most valuable asset. The dominoes fell faster now. At 9 in the morning on the second day, 36 hours into the siege, Evan Rourke played his card. He sent a mass email to the entire company staff, copying the board of directors, which was just Warren and his cronies and me. Subject statement of truth regarding audit. Attached are the sworn affidavits of myself and 4 department heads. We testify that Warren Kincaid instructed us to falsify maintenance logs and shift blame to junior personnel. We refuse to comply. We are cooperating fully with the new debt holder, Obsidian Holdings. Warren's fortress was not just breached. The guards had opened the gates and were waving me in. I sat down at the desk and drafted the final notice. I attached a copy of the land deed Vivian had given me. To Warren, Logan, and Paige Kincaid, you are currently occupying real estate owned by Peyton Smith. You are operating a business insolvent with debt owned by Peyton Smith, and you are liable for fraud against Peyton Smith. The offer of Option A amnesty in exchange for total surrender expires in 2 hours. If I do not have your resignations and the signed confessions by noon, I file the deed, the will, and the forensic audit with the district attorney. TikTok. I sent it. I waited. 10 o'clock passed. 11 o'clock passed. I expected a surrender. I expected Warren to finally break, to realize that he had been checkmated by the daughter he discarded. But I had underestimated the toxicity of Paige's survival instinct. She was not like Logan, who crumbled. She was like Warren, delusional to the bitter end. At 11:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before the deadline, my phone alerted me to a new legal filing in the Franklin County court system. Mara had set up a tracker for any activity involving the Kincaid names. Alert new civil suit. Filed, Plaintiff Paige Kincaid, Defendant Peyton Smith, Obsidian Holdings. Cause of action extortion. Hostile workplace environment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I stared at the screen, stunned. Paige had filed a lawsuit. She was claiming that I was blackmailing them. She was claiming that I had fabricated the debt and the fraud to torture the family. She was asking for an emergency injunction to stop me from foreclosing. It was a suicide run, a Hail Mary pass thrown by a desperate quarterback who didn't realize the game was already over. I called Mara. "Did you see it?" I asked. "I saw it," Mara said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. "She is an idiot, a complete and total idiot." "Explain," I said, though I already knew. "By filing a civil suit claiming extortion," Mara said. "She just opened the door to discovery to prove extortion. She has to prove the debt isn't real. That means we get to subpoena every single email, every text message, every bank record, and every deleted file to prove the debt is real. She just invited a judge to examine the very crime she was trying to hide. She thinks she can stall me," I said. "She thinks an injunction buys them time. It buys them time in the public eye," Mara agreed. "But it guarantees that this won't end in a quiet boardroom settlement. She just dragged this into open court. Every piece of dirty laundry, the stolen land, the fake will, the embezzlement, it is all going to become public record. She just ensured that the Kincaid name won't just be ruined, it will be obliterated." I walked to the window. The rain had stopped. I had given them option A. I had offered them a lifeboat. They could have lived quiet, humble lives, but Paige had chosen option B for all of them. She had chosen the nuclear option, thinking she could blast her way out. "Prepare the files, Mara," I said. "They want a fight. They want a spectacle." I thought about the loser standing at the bar. I thought about the silence before the laughter. Let's give them the show of a lifetime. The fluorescent lights of the Franklin County Civil Courthouse were a harsh, buzzing white, nothing like the warm, deceptive glow of the chandeliers at the Cedar Hollow Lodge. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. The air smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table, though technically, in this specific hearing for the emergency injunction, I was the defendant. Mara sat beside me, her posture rigid, her laptop open, across the aisle. The Kincaid family sat in a huddled row. Paige was wearing a pastel blue dress, trying to look like a fragile flower being crushed by a corporate machine. Logan looked like he had not slept in 48 hours. His tie was crooked, and he kept wiping his palms on his trousers. Warren sat in the middle, staring straight ahead, his jaw set in a line of stubborn denial. They had brought a high-priced lawyer, a man named Sterling who smelled of expensive cologne and overconfidence. He stood up to address the judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Holloway, who looked like she had absolutely no patience for family drama. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice smooth, "we are here to stop a predator. Peyton Smith, the estranged daughter, is using a fabricated debt claim to extort her own family. She has threatened to destroy their reputation and seize their home based on documents that we believe are forged or obtained through illegal corporate espionage. We are asking for an immediate injunction to stop the foreclosure and a restraining order against Ms. Smith." Paige nodded vigorously, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. She was playing the part perfectly. She wanted the court to see a vindictive sister. Judge Holloway looked over her glasses at me. "Ms. Smith, your counsel may respond." Mara stood up. She did not use flowery language. She picked up a single remote control. "Your Honor," Mara said, "we are not here to argue feelings. We are here to argue arithmetic. The plaintiff claims the debt is fabricated. We have the wire transfer receipts from Sovereign Capital. The plaintiff claims the defendant is destroying the family reputation. We submit that the family destroyed their own reputation when they engaged in systemic embezzlement and bank fraud." Sterling jumped up. Objection accusatory. "Overruled," the judge said, leaning forward. "I want to hear about the fraud." Mara pressed a button. The screen mounted on the wall to the left of the bench illuminated. It displayed the video Paige had posted, the one cut to make me look unstable. "Plaintiff Paige Kincaid submitted this video as evidence of my client's hostility," Mara said. "But here's the metadata." The screen shifted. It showed the timestamps. It showed the audio wave analysis. The plaintiff manipulated the footage to hide the fact that her father, Warren Kincaid, was coercing my client to sign a liability waiver, Mara explained. "And why did they need a liability waiver? Because of this." Mara flashed the emails between Logan and the bank manager onto the screen. The emails where Logan explicitly stated they would provide a signature later because I was traveling. The courtroom went deadly silent. "Mr. Logan Kincaid," Mara said, turning to him, "did you or did you not authorize the use of Peyton Smith's signature on a $2 million credit line extension 4 years ago?" Logan froze. He looked at Sterling, who signaled him to shut up, but Judge Holloway was staring at him. "Answer the question, Mr. Kincaid," the judge ordered. "You are under oath." Logan looked at Warren. Warren stared straight ahead, refusing to make eye contact. He was cutting Logan loose. I saw the realization hit Logan's eyes. He was the fall guy. Logan stammered. "I was instructed to do it." "Instructed by whom?" Mara pressed. "By the CEO," Logan whispered, his voice barely audible. "By my father. He said we needed the cash flow. He said Peyton wasn't using her credit anyway, so it wouldn't hurt her." A gasp rippled through the small gallery. Paige stopped pretending to cry and stared at her brother in horror. Warren closed his eyes. "So you admit to bank fraud," Mara said. "And you admit that the debt is real." "It was just a bridge loan," Logan shouted, cracking under the pressure. "We were going to pay it back, but then Paige started billing the consulting fees, and the cash reserves dried up." "You liar," Paige shrieked, jumping up. "You signed those checks. Logan, you told me it was a tax write-off." "Order," Judge Holloway slammed her gavel. "Order in this court." But the damage was done. The United Kincaid front had lasted exactly 12 minutes under scrutiny. They were tearing each other apart to avoid the wreckage. Judge Holloway looked at the documents Mara had submitted. She looked at the forensic audit from Holleridge. She looked at the affidavits from Evan Rourke and the staff. "This court is not a venue for family therapy," the judge said, her voice steel. "However, the evidence presented here suggests criminal misconduct on a significant scale. I am denying the request for an injunction. Furthermore, I am referring this entire file to the District Attorney's Office and the IRS for an immediate independent audit. Sterling, the lawyer, slumped in his chair. He knew he had just lost not only the case but likely his retainer. I stood up then. It was my turn. Your Honor, I said, I am the primary creditor. I hold the paper on the company's assets. I am requesting an emergency receivership. Kincaid Event and Lodging employs 150 people. If this drags out in court, the company fails, and those people lose their jobs. I am prepared to take immediate possession, restructure the debt, and keep the business operational, but I have one condition. Which is, the judge asked. The immediate removal of the entire executive board, I said, pointing at my family. Warren Kincaid, Logan Kincaid, and Paige Kincaid are to be barred from the premises and stripped of all decision-making power effective immediately. Warren stood up slowly. He was trembling. His face was a mask of disbelief. He had spent his life believing he was untouchable, that his charm and his name were shields that could deflect any arrow. You cannot do this, Warren said, his voice shaking. I built that lodge. I built this family. I am your father. Peyton. The room went quiet. He was playing his last card, the emotional trump card. He was trying to remind me of the blood bond, trying to make me feel small again. I looked at him across the aisle. I did not feel small. I felt 10 feet tall. You are my father, I asked, my voice echoing in the silence. Yes, Warren said, eyes pleading. And I love you. We can fix this. I took a step closer to the railing. If you love me, I asked, then why did you use your daughter's signature to borrow $2 million without her knowing? Warren opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked around the room, looking for an ally, looking for a way out, but there was nowhere to go. The question hung in the air like smoke. Did you use my name? He couldn't say no, because the evidence was on the screen. He couldn't say yes, because it was a confession. He slumped back down, defeated by his own greed. That is what I thought, I said. But there is one more thing, I continued, turning back to the judge. The plaintiff claims that seizing the lodge would be an undue burden because it is their ancestral land. However, I have one final piece of evidence to submit regarding the ownership of the property. I pulled the yellowed envelope out of my briefcase, the one Aunt Vivian had given me. This is the last will and testament of my mother, Catherine Kincaid, I said, handing the document to the bailiff. It was suppressed for 16 years. According to this notarized deed, the 40 acres of land upon which the Cedar Hollow Lodge sits were bequeathed to me, Peyton Smith. Upon my 25th birthday, Warren let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. He knew, he had known for years. I am not seizing their home, Your Honor, I said. I am evicting squatters from my land. The judge read the document. She looked at the seal. She looked at the date. The court accepts the document, Judge Holloway said. The motion for receivership is granted. Control of Kincaid Event and Lodging transfers to Meridian Vale Partners immediately. The previous management is ordered to vacate the premises by 5 p.m. today. She banged the gavel. Adjourned. The sound of the gavel was final. It was the sound of a guillotine dropping. I packed my bag calmly. Mara gave me a nod of professional respect and went to file the paperwork. The Kincaids sat there. They looked like statues of ruins. Paige put her head in her hands and began to cry. It was a soft, whimpering sound. She wasn't crying because she was sorry. She was crying because she realized she would no longer be the Princess of Columbus. She was crying because she had lost her audience. Logan sat staring at his hands. He looked up at me as I passed the table. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, only a profound, crushing shame. He realized that the loser sister he had mocked was the only person in the room with the competence to save the business he had helped destroy. Warren was the last to move. He stood up unsteadily, gripping the back of the bench. He looked old. The vitality that fueled his narcissism had evaporated. Peyton, he croaked. I stopped. I did not turn fully, just angled my head. "What do you want me to say?" he asked. His voice was small, stripped of all its boom and bluster. "Do you want me to say I am sorry? Is that what you want?" I looked at him. I looked at the man who had shaped my life through his absence and his cruelty. I realized then that I didn't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy. I just felt a vast, cool indifference. "I do not want your words, Dad," I said. "I never wanted your words. I just wanted the truth to be written down correctly." I walked away. I pushed through the double doors into the hallway. The air out here was cooler. Waiting by the benches were Evan Rourke and 3 other senior staff members. They looked terrified, holding their breath. When they saw me, they stood up. "It is over," I said to Evan. "We have control." Evan let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. One of the catering managers wiped tears from her eyes. "Does the company close?" Evan asked. "No," I said. "The company stays open. The payroll will be met on Friday. I am injecting capital from Meridian Vale to cover the shortfall." "And us?" Evan asked. "You all keep your jobs," I said. "Go back to the lodge. Tell the staff that the Kincaid era is over. Tell them that from now on, we run this business with clean books and honest work. Nobody gets fired for someone else's mistake." Evan grabbed my hand and shook it. "Thank you, Peyton." "Thank you." "Go," I said gently. "You have a wedding to host this weekend." They hurried away, energized, relieved. They had a future again. I walked toward the exit of the courthouse. The sun was shining outside now, drying up the rain on the pavement. My phone was in my pocket. I knew it was probably blowing up with messages from relatives who had heard the news, from investors, from the press. I reached into my pocket and slid the silence switch to on. I didn't need to answer them. I didn't need to explain myself. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone ever again. I walked out the doors and down the stone steps. I thought about that moment in the ballroom, the way the room had laughed. I thought about Warren raising his glass. "I am proud of all my children except the loser." I took a deep breath of the fresh air. He said he was proud of everyone except me. That is okay. I learned to be proud without him. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from your car? Your office? Or maybe while cooking dinner? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and if you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so this story can reach even more people. See you in the next video.